exploring the Erdic's footprint in the field. I'm excited to have with me Colonel Christian Patterson, Commander of the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center, otherwise known as ERDC. Good morning, Colonel Patterson.
Good morning, Annette.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to dive deep into tell me about yourself and your background.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I am a native Mississippian.
Whoop, whoop.
I have always been in Mississippi. I spent about 28 and a half years in the Mississippi National Guard, and now a member of the Army Reserve. And so grew up here, have always been here, and proud to be a Mississippian commanding ERDC.
Okay, so you say Mississippian is from where in Mississippi?
Well, I grew up in South Jackson, and my earlier years were in Yazoo City.
Okay.
And so, still residing in central Mississippi at this moment.
Well, that's great. So, all right, so Beyond the Gates conversations have spanned 3 seasons now, if you can believe it, and we've taken a dive into projects happening across ERDC's 7 labs. However, our listeners might not know that in addition to those laboratories, there are 8 ERDC field offices. Could you give us a comprehensive overview of the ERDC field offices facilities?
Yes. It's just like you said, it's very easy to have a lot of focus on the Vicksburg campus, with our 4 laboratories here. But we have those smaller field offices that are in various locations, not only throughout the United States, but, we have one overseas as well. And so recently I had the opportunity to visit our International Research Office personnel in London, England. Getting ready to go back and visit our facility in Louisville, Texas, which is the Louisville Aquatic Research Facility out there. And, of course, been up to the Permafrost Research Tunnel in Fox, Alaska. And so we also have what's called CBTech, which is at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and it stands for Contingency Base Integration Training Evaluation Center there. And so they focus
acronyms.
Yes. Being in the Army for so long, I thought that I knew all of the acronyms that we had. But once I moved over to the Corps of Engineers, there's a whole new set.
I think there's every day there's a new acronym that's being invented. I don't know. They come out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
So how does the work happening at these field offices tie into ERDC's overall mission?
That's a great question. And we have different research and development areas. Some of them include military and civil works work. And so our smaller facilities, they tie into that overall mission. And so, for example, in Louisville, which is our aquatic facility, they do a lot of specific work on invasive species in terms of plants and insects that can affect our environments. And then, for example, I know that our listeners have heard about the permafrost tunnel, from an earlier show. It's extremely important right now in order to, do research on permafrost because of the microbes that are being released into the air. And we want to see how that can affect humans in terms of, whether it would, not affect us or be something that we need to address quickly, as well as infrastructure as well.
It's just all these shows have just been so eye-opening to the many different things that the labs and now the field offices take care of. So how are the field research offices different from the ERDC labs?
Okay, so the labs are much, much bigger. The laboratories, they have a lab director, which the majority of our labs are headed up by a civilian 1-star equivalent. And then they have a deputy director. But then beyond, that, we have, technical directors, we have divisions within each lab, and then we have branches. And so that's kind of the structure of those larger organizations. But then we have those field sites that have specific areas of focus that they tend to hone in on throughout the year.
So I understand you have visited, as you say, some of these facilities. Do you have any recent success stories or exciting breakthroughs from the field offices you can share with us?
Well, I will just say, in terms of our permafrost facility, they have been extremely valuable across the board as far as expressing, putting out information as far as how these microbes are impacting our environment, all the way from, what's going into the air as far as like the gases that are being released, in addition to infrastructure. And it's a huge deal right now in terms of permafrost research, because it's in the millions and billions of dollars as far as like companies and different entities that are wanting to know how this is going to impact things, because infrastructure everywhere right now is extremely expensive in order to maintain. It's extremely expensive in order to build. And so our tunnel, for example, up in Alaska, is something that is receiving a lot of attention right now, because once you walk inside of it, that permafrost facility is showing signs of things that happened between 10,000 and 40,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so that is extremely valuable information, because there's a huge emphasis on the Arctic right now in terms of being able to maneuver and engage up there, because we're not the only ones that are interested in that area. We have some of our adversaries that are interested as well.
Right. So the one in Duck, that's a field research office?
Absolutely.
Yes, I've been there. It's very windy there.
It is. It is.
So this year we're celebrating how the labs came together 25 years ago to form one ERDC, one organization of experts across multiple disciplines. How does work at the field research offices directly assist our ERDC labs?
It's a huge impact. And you just mentioned the field research facility in Duck. Mm-hmm. I had the opportunity to go out there last year and really see our team at work. And Annette, I will tell you that they are a very valuable asset to our coastal and hydraulics laboratory. We've got an extremely long pier that shoots out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, roughly close to about 2,000 feet out into the ocean. Mm-hmm. But what's really big out there is that they do a lot of research that feeds into CHL's work as far as like approaching the near shore, mm-hmm. and that's extremely important. Whenever we have operations or conflicts, a lot of people make the assumption that, if we're going to storm the beach, we just drive up to the beach. Well, that's not the case. Different beaches and approaches, they're different. And so that's something that we have to study, because you have different wave dynamics. You have all these different variables that come into play as far as like how the military can approach the near shore in order to conduct an operation. And that's something that's extremely valuable that our field research facility provides. And they have a various amount of tools in order to make that happen, all the way from unmanned aerial vehicles to this thing called the CRAB, which is the Coastal Research Amphibious Buggy.
And it looks like a crab, by the way.
And it actually looks like a crab. I mean, this thing is tall. And so I was out there asking them, I was like, y'all actually drive this into the ocean? And they're like, yeah, you want to go? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. But, we have a lot of great tools, extremely talented and gifted researchers and scientists that, contribute, on all different levels of our organization, all the way from the tactical level to the strategic with our senior leaders.
And we've had some of the researchers on the show in previous seasons, so mm-hmm. they've gone in depth about a lot of the stuff and a lot of the research that they do that's so important. So can you discuss any collaborative initiatives between the field research offices and external partners or stakeholders to address specific challenges or advance research goals?
Well, I will tell you that what's really big in that area is power and energy and water generation. And so our construction engineering research laboratory, which is based in Champaign, Illinois, co-located with the University of Illinois, is really, really connected to CBTech, in terms of what I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. Power, energy, and water is extremely important to installations. And especially forward installations whenever we have contingency operations going on. And the reason why is because if we can become efficient as far as our energy and water, that keeps our service members off of the roads. So if we have a generator, for example, that, can go longer, then that decreases the amount of convoys that are on the road as far as like taking fuel back and forth. And so that's one of the goals that we have. And so one of the great things about ERDC is that we have a ton of partnerships between industry, academia, in order to work together to be able to produce those solutions for the nation in the warfight.
So, during your visits, have you come across any cool gadgets or innovative methods that are being used in the field that really stood out to you?
Well, I really like the equipment that the field research facility has. I mean, it's extremely cool to sit there and watch them work, and then at the same time see our young researchers that are just now starting at ERDC to just be so passionate about what they do. So whenever I was out at Duck, they have this vehicle that literally, they're driving on the beach and then they just take off into the water and, start conducting research and everything. And my lasting memory from going out there was seeing all of these young researchers there, and they were aboard that piece of equipment, and everybody had a smile on their face. Every single one.
Exactly.
And it's just refreshing to see that because, there's a lot of things that we see, out there in the, news on social media that can be perceived as negative. Mm-hmm. But when you see people who are passionate about what they do like that, it just makes you feel really good and really proud to be, associated with them.
And that's one thing that we witness every time we do these shows is people sitting in that chair right there, and then they just go on, and the look that they have and the enthusiasm that they have is the passion. And I tell people all the time, you can't teach it. You cannot teach passion. It's just, it's natural. So ERDC considers its people its greatest strength, as we talk about, the passion. Can you share some memorable individuals that you've encountered during your journeys?
It's funny. I can tell you that one of them is 3 feet away from me right now. and that, that is you, Annette. And I have to give you credit because, one of the things that we've been working really hard on over the past couple of years is telling our story.
Right.
And so, just want to give you, kudos and props for being, at the tip of the spear in order to tell our story.
Thank you.
But there are countless individuals who are a part of great teams throughout our enterprise that I could go all day on. One of them is a gentleman named Dennis Markle, and he works as a part of our resource management office. And he recently marked 50 years. This was last month from when he actually raised his right hand to come into ERDC service. And it is amazing to be able to encounter people like Dennis and so many others who have that impressive longevity, who have contributed so much to our organization. There are many others out there. Nick Boone, who works for our Geotechnical and Structures Laboratory, him along with Pam Kennebrew, they're just so impressive in terms of the things that they know. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, whenever you talk to those two, and I tell them all the time, I'm like, it seems like y'all have actually been in the Army for about 30 or 40 years. Mm-hmm. And there are things that they just know that give you that impression. But when you ask them, hey, are you prior service? They're like, no, haven't served, but have just been around for a while and just know different things.
Right.
And so every time I get with those two, I learn something, different. I learn something new, and I feel stronger and better as a result of that. And so there are, a tremendous amount of instances like that with people all over the enterprise that are just experts like that in what they do. The lab directors that we have are extremely gifted and talented. Everybody from Dr. Walmsley to Dr. Russo, they all have their own special style to where they are extremely accomplished academically. They're accomplished in terms of their experience with industry. They're accomplished with their total journey of things that they've experienced. And, but when you look at ERDC in general, one of the things that I think that sets us apart from a lot of different places is that you have researchers and scientists that have, done a lot of education. But when you look at what they're involved in outside of ERDC, it's impressive as well. Like we've got people who are researchers and scientists every day who are solving these very complex and difficult problems. But on the weekend, they're serving as a referee in an NCAA football championship game.
Just something small like that, yes.
That's right. Or, we'll have a lab director like Dr. Walmsley who is leading our oldest lab, which actually started ERDC, but he has a goal in order to run marathons in every single U.S. state. And he's well on his way to accomplishing that goal. So you have stories all over the place like that where people are doing these difficult things whenever they clock out, but as they're doing those difficult things, they're still thinking about the problems that we need in order to make our nation safer and better and do things faster and cheaper.
They're exceeding in life also.
They're exceeding in life, and so I know that there are a bunch of people who I can go and get an explanation about a scientific phenomenon, but then I know about so many great fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters that if I actually needed any life advice, I've got infinitely many people to go to.
In fact, 2,500, right?
Roughly 2,500, that's correct.
Well, so finally, what message would you like to convey to listeners about the importance of the work being done at the ERDC field research offices?
Well, one of the biggest things that I would ask our listeners to do is to subscribe to our social media accounts. That's extremely important to be able to keep up with what's going on with our enterprise. Because, when you think about ERDC, it's easy, like we said at the top, to just think Vicksburg and, our 800 or so acre installation. But whenever I think about ERDC, I think about that, the fact that we extend from Fox, Alaska to Vicksburg, Mississippi, to Champaign, Illinois, to Hanover, New Hampshire, to Alexandria, Virginia, to Treat Island, Maine, all the way to London, England. But then going past that, Annette, we have researchers that are doing operations and research across the entire world. And so we see a lot of airports, we see a lot of different locales that don't necessarily make the news because, the nature of what we're working on, but it extends far. And so those field research offices are extremely important, towards that mission in order to make sure that, the missions that have been set before us, we get them taken care of.
Fantastic. Well, do you have anything to add on to the show?
I would just like to add, Annette, that the city of Vicksburg, Warren County, and all of our ERDC communities are extremely important to what we do. The support means everything. And, we know that we could not do what we do each and every day without the support of the community. And so we ask that, you just keep up with what we're doing on social media, and then also help us to tell our story. And, it's a lot to tell. And so the example that, I gave the other day, whenever we were out with the Rotary Club, was that ERDC is kind of like a Rubik's Cube, except it's different from a traditional Rubik's Cube in that, one side with ERDC has about 100 pieces to it instead of 9. And whenever you're trying to line up those solids to win the game with ERDC, it's tough because those pieces on each side, which are 100, are continuously moving,
Right.
But they're moving in a positive direction in order to make change. And so that's a challenge that is, beautiful to have because we've got over 2,000 projects going on at any one time. But, we're after answers and we're after solutions. And so our team is committed in order to find them and make our world safer and better.